All right, hello everyone, and welcome to the research lesson. I hope you're enjoying camp so far, and I'm sorry that I can't be there with you. My name is Chris Teeters, and I am one of the assistant coaches. A little bit of background about me: I am an attorney. I've been an attorney for about 3 years now. Previous to that, I've been judging debate and forensics for roughly 12 years now, more like 11 years. In college, I did a semester debate. I did theater. In high school, I did theater, forensics, debate. So I've got a lot of experience about this. But also, while in law school and as an attorney, I've spent many years doing legal and other styles of research. So I wanted to teach you a little bit today about how to be a researcher and how to be an effective researcher while being a part of the debate team. I know that a lot of you might already know how to use Google or how to at least look some stuff up whenever you need it, but there's a little bit more to research than just using Google. So let's get started. What is this lesson all about? Well, we're going to try to come up with a little bit about information about why research is important. Why do you need to do research when you're on the debate team? And why is it so important that it's a team effort and not just all laid on the shoulders of one person, specifically Andrew Flory? Then we're going to talk about how to efficiently locate cards. For those of you who are new to debate, the novices in the room, cards are what we call research. You've probably been looking at them a little bit while at debate camp. But we're going to talk about ways to efficiently locate the information that goes into those cards so that we're not just spinning our wheels looking at the same information over and over again. We're also going to talk a little bit about how to evaluate the quality of sources and the sufficiency of a card. One of the big issues that people sometimes have is that they just have a card and it says what it says, and that's the end of their thought process on it. And to be an effective researcher, you need to think a little bit deeper about what a piece of evidence says. And finally, we're going to introduce and reintroduce some research tools and sources. These are things you probably are familiar with or will become familiar with as the year goes on. But just in case you haven't heard of some of these tools, we're at least going to mention them and where you can find the tools when you want to go use them. What this lesson isn't going to be, though, is how do you make or cut a card. We're not going to talk about how to form a case, how to make an argument. We're not going to tell you anything in this lesson about what a harms argument is, what a disad is, what a K is, and we're definitely not going to be talking about topicality today. So one of the things you may have experienced already, and if you haven't, you will, is a resource out there called Open Evidence, or OpenEv, or the CAMP files, however you want to refer to it. This is a relatively new innovation in debate where some students have the opportunity, the privilege to go to camps or summer camps over the summer, obviously, and they get the opportunity to do a whole bunch of research with college debaters, college coaches, and get a really high-level amount of information about the topic for about 3 to 6 weeks, depending on how long you want to go to camp. And as a part of the changes in debate culture, this evidence that they produce at these camps is now shared with everybody. So you right now can go to Open Evidence and get some of the highest quality evidence that 6 weeks of time can produce with some of the best coaches and thinkers about the topic could help guide in the production. So if you get all of this great evidence available to you, why should you be expected to do more research about the topic? Why should you have to produce any more cards when all of this great evidence is out there? Well, there's a few major reasons. Number one, research wins debate. Typically in, let's say 7 out of 10 rounds, the best read debater is going to win the round. What that means is the debater who has read the most cards, and not just in the round, but as they're prepping for the round. The debater who's done the most outside research, the debater who knows this topic backwards and forwards. They know your sources better than you do. that debater's probably going to win the round, not just because of the arguments they make, but because they're going to be able to understand your arguments faster than you're going to be able to understand them. The second thing is that it really builds off of a team effort. The two-person team in the room who has the better research available to them usually will win the round because they have the cards that can win those arguments. They have better cards to make different and more interesting arguments. And most importantly, they have up-to-date cards. See, with open evidence, it kind of gets frozen a little bit at the point in time that the season starts, because that's when camp takes place. Now, there may be additional evidence added throughout the year, but the bulk of the evidence comes in over the summer. And so while it's really useful in August and September to have all of this great evidence, by the time November comes around, the whole world could have changed, and that evidence might not still be useful. So the team with the better research, the better evidence, the most recent evidence, usually is going to win the round. And finally, the reason we need you, novices and experienced debaters alike, to be better researchers is because when our squad together is able to do a lot of high quality research, it means one person doesn't have to do all of that research, and it means all of you get the benefit of being better read in the topic. So we want you as a squad to be better researchers, because the squad with the best researchers usually wins the round. Again, we use the word usually here regularly because this is debate, and debate is like life, and things can just happen that don't make a lot of sense. But usually, you'll win the round if you have better research. But the most important reason why you need to be a good researcher is because debate is an educational activity, and that's not just a thing we say in the middle of the round trying to sway a judge. It actually is true. We want you at the end of the debate season to become a mini expert about the topic. We want you to understand your case backwards and forwards. We want you to understand the arguments both in favor and against your case backwards and forwards. We want you to know what it is that you're talking about, so that when it comes time for you to come back to debate next season, we can make you an expert on another thing. And by the end of your high school career, you'll be 4 times the expert that you were before you got into high school. So let's talk about research strategies. Research is not just going out into the wild, asking a question, and hoping you can just stumble upon an answer. Research is a methodological way of achieving information gathering. So let's talk about this from the wrong perspective. What is the wrong way to research for debate? Typically, the novice debater, you novices out there, and even some of our experienced debaters, will start researching a topic by just going into Google and just throw in everything into one search. Saudi Arabia, arms, nuclear weapons, airplanes, computers, government, U.S. sales. Hit enter, and I haven't found anything. I guess I can't find anything. There's nothing out there. There's nothing more annoying to hear as a coach than the phrase, "there's nothing out there." What in the world could that possibly mean other than you haven't researched hard enough? A couple other things that people will do when they're new to doing research, they'll just look at the first page of a Google search, or really just the first result, and when it doesn't say what they want it to say, or the first couple items don't say what they want it to say, they'll try something else, then something else, then something else, and then they'll be frustrated and say, "I just can't find it." That's not a really methodological approach. It's not a very rigorous approach, and doing it that way will almost ensure you will miss something important about your research question. Another thing that sometimes happens, and this is not frequent for our team, but it is sometimes frequent for other teams, they'll just be in source that's just a guy saying a thing. And, you won't have a real deep ability to evaluate what is being said, or it'll be used in support of an argument, a broader argument, and we'll just kind of pass over it. So when you're doing research, you want to make certain you know who is saying the thing that you're quoting. What are their qualifications to say the thing that they're quoting? Are they just making it up? Are they biased? And we'll go over that a little bit later. Some people will just stop at Wikipedia. They'll just look at the Wikipedia article and go, okay, I understand it now. I don't need any additional cards. Wikipedia is a really great resource. It is a fantastic resource to get you started on a topic. It is not the finish of a research project. Finally, some people, not you, but other people, will just make up a piece of evidence. They will fully invent a source, or they'll fully invent some sentences that a real source might have said, or they'll just invent some words. That's academic dishonesty. You do not want to do that. If we as coaches find out that you are doing that, there will be severe heck to pay. There's enough evidence and enough real-world information out there that we don't need you making it up for us. So what is this methodological approach that I am advocating for that you will use to help guide your research? There's a lot of different names for this, but it's a kind of structured approach that I'm calling Design, Search, Refine. That's a 3-step process to help you answer any research question, answer any idea, help you develop an argument. It's a really nifty little tool that is a little more rigorous at first when you're getting used to using it, and then becomes more natural and more ingrained as you go along in your research career. So the first step of design, search, refine is the design step. And what do I mean by design? Design in this context means you're going to be crafting your research question in a way that will help you get to the answer. So say, for example, I want to know, how are U.S. arms sales affecting the Middle East? That's a pretty big question. It's a huge question. It will be answered over and over and over again during this debate topic. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to just articulate that as a question. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be the final question that we're going to try to answer, but let's just get something down. My question is, how are arms sales to Saudi Arabia affecting the Middle East? Then I'm going to try to break that question down into some constituent parts. First and foremost, I'm going to ask, what is an arms sale? There may be cards, and I'm guaranteeing you that there probably are cards out there on Open Evidence or in one of the topic discussion papers about what an arm is in the process of an arms sale. You're going to want to know that because it's going to guide the rest of your research. But I'll put that down as one of the constituent questions to my main question. What is an arm and what is an arms sale? The second question I'm going to ask is, what does it mean to sell arms to Saudi Arabia? There are a lot of different nuances that this question could be addressing. Are we talking about to the Saudi Arabian government? Are we talking to a Saudi Arabian business? Are we talking about just to a single Saudi prince? Are we talking about routing sales through Saudi Arabia to somewhere else in the Middle East or to somewhere else in the world? There are a lot of ways we can approach that question. So as I've written down my big question and I'm writing down these constituent questions, I'm going to create that as a separate category of what that question really means. The third question I might have is, what do I mean by affect the Middle East? Are we talking on economic grounds? Are we talking on human life grounds? Are we talking on human rights grounds? Are we talking on social grounds? What do I mean when I say affect the Middle East? So I'm going to write that down as something else that I can do some research on. The next step I'm going to take is I'm going to write down a few words or ideas or other questions associated with those constituent questions and associated with the main question underneath each of these constituent questions. So let's take that first one. What is an arm and what is an arms sale? I might write down things like guns or planes, or the F-35 project, or missiles, or bombs, or computer components. I might write down things like international weapons treaties. I might write down things like bullets, different ideas of what could be an arm that will help me when I'm going to do the research, the search portion of design, search, refine. And I'm going to use these words and these ideas as kind of a brainstorming step to get me to the next step. When we're starting to use design, search, refine, I want you to actually write this out. I want you to write these things out in kind of an outline or however, a word map, however this works for you. I want you to write out the question, the constituent questions, the associated ideas and thoughts, and whatever other minor little questions you might have associated with those constituent questions. I want you to write this out just so that you get in the habit of thinking this way, taking a big problem, breaking it down into pieces, and breaking those pieces down even further. That's the first major step to becoming a good and focused researcher. Because as you go to research, you'll use these ideas as a way of narrowing topics or broadening a search that just didn't produce enough for you, or taking your search in a new direction when you otherwise would have been a little confused. So let's think about that as we talk about the next step, which is going to be search. Searching, especially for debaters, can be a very surface level activity. We can really want to avoid going at all at depth when we're talking about searching through thousands and thousands of pages and thousands of documents, trying to find that one little piece of information we're looking for. But when we use a guided approach, we're able to help separate the signal from the noise. So let's start with the basics. When we're first crafting our initial set of searches, we want to be creative, right? The documents might not be specific to Saudi Arabia that we're looking for. They may not be specific to the country of interest or the weapon of interest or the specific sales program of interest that I'm looking for. We want to be creative by using a broad amount of search terms and trying different searches when one search doesn't start to pan out. Creativity in research is key. You have to also think about where your documents might be located. So say I want to find statistics about how many weapons we've sold to China over the last 30 years. Well, I probably am not going to find that information on the Topeka Capital Journal's webpage. I might find it through a government source, though. And so if Google takes me to a government source that doesn't quite have what I want, I might just stay on that source to try to search through what that website has available to it to try to find the information I'm looking for. Just because Google doesn't produce what you're looking for on the first go doesn't mean that it's not there. So that's the next step of this. You gotta be persistent. You have to try different searches. You have to try different search terms. You have to try different websites. As silly as it may sound, maybe Google's just prioritizing different search results than, say, DuckDuckGo or Bing, or God forbid you used Yahoo. You could try a whole bunch of different tools, different websites. You could try going to government data repositories, different places where the information might be found, but you have to be persistent when you're doing research. It's really easy to get discouraged when the first 5 pages of a Google search doesn't show you anything even remotely like what you're looking for. But when you're persistent, you'll be able to find what you're looking for with less frustration than if you just give up after the first couple tries. So once we're being creative and once we're being persistent in our research and we're using Google to our best ability, Understand that there may be some ways to trick Google into giving us a little bit more information that we're specifically looking for. Typically, when we're talking about search engines, this process or these tools are called search terms and connectors. You may have heard the term advanced search. Google itself doesn't really utilize advanced search or search terms and connectors very much anymore, but other tools like DuckDuckGo, like Bing, and other search engines will still utilize search terms and connectors. And the way a search term and connector works is it takes two disparate terms. In the example here, dog and canine are two different terms, and it connects them with some logical relationship. In the example here, we're looking for all results that contain dog or canine. That or can really broaden a search without having us waste our time both searching dog and then searching canine and then doing multiple repetitive searches. In our example about Saudi Arabia, and I'm talking about different arms, I might try saying guns or boats or missiles or F-35. And is again a similar logical connection. It's every search that includes both dog and canine, not the same kind of concept. All searches that contain dog but not canine. A wildcard character is something that's a little confusing the first time you see it, but it makes sense after you know what you're looking at. Depending on the search engine you're using, again, Google doesn't really respect these, but other search engines do. You may want to use something that's called a wildcard. And the way it works is, say you want to find all words that start with the first, all searches that have a word that starts with the first three letters SCA. I don't know what words you'd be wanting to filter out that way, but maybe that's the words that you're looking for all start with SCA. You can type SCA and then whatever the wildcard character is for your search engine, and the search result will produce everything that has a word in it that starts with SCA. So maybe I have a document that I'm looking for that says the word scan, but it might say scan line, it might say scanner, it might say scan ton if that were a city. And so your search terms may be a little confusing, but using these search terms and connectors, we can produce more refined results and save ourselves some time as we're doing research. The one of these that Google does absolutely respect is exact quotes. Google will still search exact quotes most of the time. Sometimes it will just ignore your quotes or give you a result that's like the thing that's in your quotes. Always be aware while you're looking at Google what the results are that it produces. Remember that Google's not so much a search engine to try to find everything that's out there. The way Google is designed currently, it's trying to find things that are relevant to you as a person, not necessarily to you with your search. That distinction is a little weird, but it's why it can be sometimes difficult to find old things or things that are obscure using Google, whereas other search engines might produce those results for you. One of the things that Google does have is the advanced search option or additional terms or additional options. If you click that button when you do a search or get search results from Google, it will show you things like date range or location that can help narrow down where your documents are from or when your documents are from, and that might be a useful way to find information. The other thing that I wanted you to learn is that you don't just have to use Google. There are lots of other databases or search engines that you can utilize to find more nuanced or more specialty documents. I'm talking about things like research papers or trade journal articles, or really narrow publications that were probably read by 2 people if they were read at all. So Piper's Library has a couple of really great databases that you can go look at while you're doing this research. The most common one to use is EBSCOhost. EBSCOhost is a database of articles and other publications that utilizes search terms and connectors, that utilizes a lot of filtering so that you can find very narrow ranges of documents. EBSCOhost, though, is a little bit limited, and what it'll show you is an entry about an article, but it may not always have that article available to you. What I would recommend in situations like that is go talk to the librarians to help you find the articles that you're looking for. They may be able to direct you in a unique way or a new way to actually get what you're looking for. But if you're looking for some more scientific information or some more hard-pressed data other than just news articles, EBSCOhost is a really great place to start. A couple of these other databases will also be somewhat useful for you as you are doing research. Specifically, Business Source Primer will have some business documents, since we're dealing with a lot of private businesses that are selling weapons either to the United States or to foreign countries. Having some business information might be useful to your research, to whatever question you're looking for. So the Business Source Primer might be helpful. Academic Search Primer will also start searching academic articles. One thing to know and think about with this topic, and we'll talk about it here in just a second, is that there are a lot of people who've been talking about arms sales for a very long time. For some of you, these researchers have been writing these articles longer than you've been alive, and they've been talking about it and talking about it and talking about it. And so some of this information, these academic articles, may have really useful information about broad ranges of topics that you'll want to get a look at, and Academic Search Primer might be a good, useful start for you on that. So where else can you go to try to find information? Where else other than just Google? I know I keep harping on this, but Google is a good starting tool. But as time goes on, Google is less useful for finding that more obscure, more difficult, more a deep understanding and deeper information than what you're looking for. So one of the other tools that Google offers is Google Scholar. If you've never used Google Scholar, it's just the exact same thing as Google, except it has better tools for finding academic-style articles. Again, we were just talking about different researchers, different academics, people who have political science degrees have been writing this information for a very long time. And you can use Google Scholar to help get yourself access to some books or some articles, or at least point you in the right direction where you can go ask a librarian or someone else to help you find these articles. EBSCOhost, again, was a big database tool that's really useful to you if you are willing to spend a few minutes learning how to find information on EBSCOhost. Other tools that you may not immediately think of, again, we mentioned Wikipedia, but Wikipedia is more useful than just a tool to get a quick high-level understanding of a topic. Wikipedia often will have sources or references to other articles, and because it's so hyperlinked together, you can spend a lot of time just getting a primer on an issue while you're doing research, while you're in those early stages of trying to answer your question. You've got a lot of background information you've got to figure out. Spending a few minutes on Wikipedia is a great way to use your time because it's a very efficient way of taking a complex amount of information and giving it to you in a kind of bite-sized and understandable fashion. Encyclopedia Britannica, the World Book, a few other sources are out there that can also serve in a more narrow capacity. They're not always as cited, they're not always as up to date, but they can give you some historical information and again, that kind of bite-size, easy to understand question or information about your question. The other thing that you, and I think our team specifically, needs to utilize more, talk to the librarians. Either ask the Piper librarian, or you can reach out to the Kansas City, Kansas Public Library, or you can reach out to the Kansas State Library for help with research. These are people who went to school to help you do your research. They spend their lives helping people like you do research, and they love nothing more than to help you do research. Utilize these resources. If you do not have one currently, you can get a Kansas State Library card relatively easy, pretty much at any library in the state, or you can apply online. And that'll give you access to more articles and more tools and EBSCOhosts and a few other databases that are listed in the picture here. But those tools can help you when Google is being obstinate and not producing the article. If this isn't obvious yet, the point of the search step is to take those terms and those questions that we drafted earlier and find a broad range of information to help you get a grasp as to what you're working on. So there are other sources too that have less potentially searchable means, but are nonetheless very, very useful sources. The United States federal government loves data. If you've never tried to look at census data or the fact book or the CIA fact book on government websites, it just goes on and on and on. There is a treasure trove of data on government websites, but the trick is it's not always the easiest thing to search. So you have to spend time on the websites getting yourself familiar with what the website has available to you, what the publications that are available to you, to be able to find articles and information that are relevant to your search. But do not blow off those websites just because they're a little bit designed in the 1990s. They are extraordinarily useful when trying to find debate articles, debate cards, when trying to make arguments, and specifically when trying to find information that is just dollars and cents information. How many guns were sold to what country when? Government sources are just crammed with it. But that's not to say they're the only source, and it's not to say they're the complete source. The government has a lot of things that are confidential or secret or just not generally public records that might not be out there. The government data may not be the most up-to-date data, and it may just be inaccurate data because of one issue or another, transitions between administrations, or because there was a transcribing error. And one thing to always be aware of whenever dealing with any source, but especially government data, is that the data may be biased towards the government. Shocker, I know. So another source you can go to is third-party watchdog groups, and especially with issues of arms sales, there are well-established, well-researched, well-funded watchdog groups that have been studying United States arms sales for generations. These watchdog groups will produce publications about the impact of arms sales. They'll talk to you about the scope of arms sales, the amount of arms sales, the value of arms sales. They'll talk to you about policy proposals about how to control or not control arms sales, depending on the particular political leanings of the watchdog group. But watchdog groups have a lot of information. But one key point about watchdog groups is they are typically biased towards whatever the mission statement of the watchdog organization is. An organization with international peace in its title might be biased against the international sale of arms. So just carry that in the back of your mind when you're evaluating the information. Make certain it makes sense. Make certain it's good information, and make certain that it's not just telling you a whole lot of information or leaving out a whole lot of information that would otherwise provide context to the individual story that they're telling. You can also look for private specialized and industry media. And what this is if you think about something like the Washington Post or CNN, that's mass market media, right? Everybody is reading the Washington Post or CNN or watching Fox News or listening to your local news or things like that. That's media that's designed to be consumed by everyone. And because it's designed to be consumed by everyone, it doesn't always have a very high level of writing or a lot of insight into the technical aspects that they're writing about. A classic mental fallacy is that you can read a newspaper article or listen to a media report about something you know a lot about and laugh at how wrong and incredibly inaccurate they are, and then go to the next story and go, oh yeah, that must be true. The media says that's what it is, and just completely forget about all those levels of inaccuracy that they had in the first story. Well, private, specialized, and industry media, these are things like Boeing International Magazine. I don't think that's a real magazine, but imagine that Boeing produced a magazine. That might be a private industry media magazine that's really only meant to talk about Boeing issues and can talk about Boeing issues at a level much deeper than, say, the Washington Post. Specialized journals and things like that. In the world of computer science, there's the IEEE journal that really only talks about electrical engineering issues, and it's very, very narrow and very, very technical, but it provides a lot of information that the mass media will never talk about. And it can be a really useful tool. These industry media publications can be really useful tools for getting an understanding of how the industry that your case plan in this debate topic might respond to whatever plan you're proposing. How do they view arms sales? Why do they do arms sales? Obviously to make money. But why do they sell arms to the countries that they sell to? Why do they even make the arms in the first place to sell to the countries that they sell to? The specialized and industry media can give you a really good grasp of those sorts of things. And again, we've talked about it, academia. Researchers love nothing more than to hear themselves talk, and the researchers love nothing more than to write about the things they talk about. There is a lot of academic writing out there. Always go take a look at that to get a good idea of what's out there. Understand it will probably be very dry. It will probably be very technical, but it's a really good place to get some information that otherwise wouldn't exist in the world. So now that you've taken all of these ideas and questions that you've drafted on the design stage, and you've done all of this research, you've been creative, you've been persistent, and you've gone through all of these different government and non-government sources, and you've dug deep, and you found this great article, how do you know it makes sense and it's actually useful to you in debate? Well, the first test, as always, when you're doing research, is something that's called the sniff test or the laugh test or the hold your nose test. It's a test of the document that when you read it and you look at it, does it make you laugh? Does something about it just not smell right? Does something about it just look absolutely wrong, but you can't put your finger on it? If so, it's probably not a good article. If you're looking at it and you go, well, that sounds absolutely ridiculous. I don't think that Jimmy Carter is secretly flying bombers over India. That just doesn't sound right. Well, do a little extra research and see if anybody else can verify that Jimmy Carter is in fact flying B-52s over India as we speak. This is true information. You need to know this. The sniff test is really, really important because if you don't stop and evaluate your information, and you don't stop and think about it, number one, you don't know what you're talking about with this card. It's important that you have taken the time to read and think about the card to make certain you have any idea what it says and what it's talking about and what it means, so that when it comes time to use the card in the debate round, you can rely on that knowledge that you've already done and you don't have to figure it out in a round. And the second thing is that if it doesn't pass the sniff test, a judge sitting in the round might listen to you and do one of those eyebrow raises and go, "What did you say?" Because that information didn't pass their sniff test. Wherever possible, utilize information that passes your sniff test. And if you can't find some information that passes your sniff test, make certain that what you're saying is actually true. That's the next step here. You really want to make certain your information is valid. There's a few really easy things you can do to make certain your information is valid. Can you find an author associated with the article or whatever it is you're reading? If you can't find an author, why? If it's a news article or something posted on a blog and you can't find an author, it's probably because somebody's trying to hide that information, and it may mean that it's a whole lot of hooey. Can you find the credentials of the author? Just because Chris Teeters wrote an article about Saudi Arabian arms sales doesn't mean I know the first thing about Saudi Arabian arms sales. So make certain that you can find what the guy is an expert in when he wrote this article. Typically speaking, Colonel Sanders is probably not the person you should be citing for intricate information about the political struggle of the Yemeni people. Is there a date on the article? Undated articles exist. Undated information out there exists. But you have to wonder, when did it come about? And is it even accurate today? You can find articles out there that say the perfect thing, and when you scroll around on the website, you finally find in tiny print that it was written 15 years ago. You have to wonder, is it still true? Is it still accurate? Or was it even accurate then? Did what they were saying never pan out? Did what they were predicting turn out to be completely false? It's important to check the date. The next two things to evaluate are biases. Say I get a news article from Breitbart.com, and it says all of this stuff about the greatness of American arms sales. I might think this article is great because it says exactly what I'm looking for, but I have to wonder, is it accurate and true because it's from an organization that otherwise may have biases that might lead us to believe that it was either false or not actually telling us the whole story. But even if it's from a good source, even if it's from the University of, or let's say Duke University, it's an article published by Duke University, you need to also check the individual bias of the author. If you go and read this article that was published by Duke University, but it's actually published by the head of the anti-arms sales ever, they're the worst thing ever, organization in the world, it may have some individual bias that may taint the quality of the information. Now, to be clear, just because somebody is biased doesn't mean the information is bad. It just means you need to do extra work to confirm that the content is accurate with other sources. That's a really important step to make certain that what you're reading in round is true and isn't something some guy just made up. Remember when we said at the beginning that research has to be more than, so I got this guy and he's saying this really great stuff. This is that important step. You have to do additional research if there is biases that you can discern with the information. Now, you may not know the biases of everyone. In fact, it'd be really surprising if you did. So if you can't find any obvious bias, you don't know why there'd be a reason to have problems with the information, it's probably a good article. If you're concerned or if you want to find information, ask somebody who's got more experience about this with you than you. Heck, ask a librarian. They may be able to tell you something. And everybody has biases. It's not a problem to have a bias. It is a problem to use bad information. And the difference between that is making certain that when a person who has a bias is writing about the thing that is impacted by their bias, their information is still good. And that's why you got to verify what you're saying. So once you've done all of this searching, you've got information, what's the next step? The next step is to go back to the design phase and refine it. You may have new words to add to your word map. You have new questions that you want answers to. You've got answers to some of the questions you had before. Add to your word map, add to your research guide, and do the whole process again, searching and refining until you have come to a conclusion and you feel comfortable with your answer. So here's another quick thing, though. Say you're doing all of this research. You're spending hours and hours and hours, and you just can't answer this question. Is it worth your time to keep searching? And you've tried everything. Mind you, you've done different words, you've done different databases, you've spent 20 minutes just trying to make the government website make any sense to you. You've done everything in your power to find it, and you didn't just stop at a Google search. Should you keep being persistent? Well, if you've spent a lot of time searching for something and you can't find anything, it may just be time to call it quits. And that's okay. Maybe you'll need to find some other research answer, some other utterly unrelated question that may lead you down the path that you were looking for first. Maybe it's just not out there. But if you've done your due diligence, you've done your research, you've tried your best, you've given it the old college try, and there's just nothing, that's okay too. The point of what we're doing here is not to make you spin your wheels and try your best, try, and never stop searching for that one golden card that exists out there somewhere you think. The point here is to be efficient with your time. Our debate season starts with camp and ends in January. That's not a lot of time, and we have to use that time efficiently. So we want to use this design, search, refine process to be efficient with our searches, to be efficient with our research. But we don't want to use this process to stop searching for anything and search without one magical card. I can guarantee you can waste a lot of time down a research hole. And you have to know when to stop. It's not after one Google search, but it may be after you can't find anything, or what you found is just not really what is useful to you in that moment. However, I will say one last thing on this point. If you find something and it's not useful to you, in fact, it says the exact opposite of what you're looking for, that doesn't mean it's not good research. You've done a few things that are really important. First, you've learned about the topic. You've learned about this area that we needed you to learn about. And when you go into round or when you do more research later, you're going to have that background behind your head while you're doing that additional research. It means you're going to be more efficient. You're going to be a better debater. You're going to be the better read debater. The second thing that's really going to be doing is that you may find something in this process that is not at all useful to you, but it's useful to your squad mate who is dying, searching for that one thing, and you just happen to stumble upon it and it wasn't useful to you. Communicate with each other about what you're finding, because that's going to be a useful step too. So after you've done all your research, you've written everything, you've gotten all your cards together, it's time to debate, but you still got questions. So if you've got questions, first off, you all need to have my phone number, because when we go to tournaments together, I need to be able to get a hold of you, and you need to be able to get a hold of me with questions. So please take down my phone number, take down my email address. I'm usually pretty responsive. If I'm not, you can yell at me on Tuesdays from 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. That's when I'm going to be at work nights. Coach Hayflick should be there. I think it's 6 p.m. to 8 p.m., but since I'm not there, and since I can't tell you exactly what she's going to say, go ahead and ask her, and you'll be able to clarify that. If you have any other additional questions about research, or you want to talk about this topic a little bit more, feel free to reach out to me. My name is Coach Teeters, and I hope you have a good rest of the camp, and I look forward to working with you this season.